Hi, everybody. Welcome to Next in Media. I'm Mike Shields. This is our special 10-part video series focusing on the YouTube ad ecosystem. My guest this week is Brad Feinberg. He's VP of Media and Digital for AmCom Molson Coors. Hey, Brad. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk to you about the YouTube ad world in general. When you look, YouTube has been trying to crack the TV ad market for a while. When they start to hit this place where they are now 10% of all connected TV viewing, how does that change the equation in the TV market?
I don't think it's, obviously their scale makes them a viable competitor and overall audience in terms of how, especially younger consumers are spending time in front of the box that sits on maybe on their living room wall. But ultimately, some of the things we look at go beyond that. So while it is a part of the equation, I would say, in terms of how we make investment decisions, it doesn't automatically reflect that we're going to make a big significant change or jump in our strategy, and largely due to the fact that still a lot of live sports viewing is still done on other platforms, right? And I guess you would say other platforms now, inclusive of platforms like Apple TV Plus, Amazon, Peacock, Paramount Plus, etc., Netflix, right? Even to some extent, I think potentially in the future. So I do think because of that, we still it makes what we talk about often, and I'll just add or leave you at this point related to that, is that when we think of like building audiences, and I think we may have even spoke about this before, we talk about building a waterfall to drive reach. So YouTube is, because of its size, probably is not at the tip of the waterfall. It's probably closer to the bottom now as a result. So we're building reach over multiple platforms to drive audience engagement and or just affinity for particular programs and content relative to that 21 plus, kind of consumer in our category.
Right. So it's not as though, I think people might assume this, it's so simplistic, but, they're 10% of CTV now. That's 10% of our budget as YouTube. We have to reflect that. That's not really how it works.
Well, it depends on what your objectives are as a media or a marketer, right? And for us, right, we also look at audience affinities or places where our brands perform really well. And we know sports still, not surprising in our category,
right?
In live sports, it still makes up a lot of efficient reach. Now, the price tag for sports is high. That said, when we do back-end marketing analytics, we still see it's not a lot of stuff compete with it. And when you look at the top stuff on TV in terms of overall reach, of the top 50 shows, again, I'm sure without excluding YouTube, because I guess you would have to add that in. Again, that's how we build the waterfall. But the top 50 shows, vast majority of them are live sports related.
Right. And, aside from YouTube getting live sports, which they might someday,
sure.
I guess, how would they graduate? Is it a measurement challenge? Do you want to be able to buy those 10 million viewers in one night like you can in sports? Is it transparency, safety? Like what's in their way of building on the share?
It is different for different categories. For our category, and I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole on this point, but we have limitations in the way we're allowed to buy on YouTube or in Google in general, because we're considered a quote unquote restricted category. And so I can't go much beyond demographics, or maybe affinities and language are like at the top tier of the way I can start to segment or target my audiences. And so as a result, right, it does play a role, but maybe other marketers see it as a way to get closer to, tying it into their first party data, get better at like reaching certain audiences that have a higher degree of affinity or performance as it relates to a particular media buy. And so I do think there are upsides there. On the brand safety side of things, we do a scorecard on brand safety across all our platforms twice annually. We reevaluate our partners against a set of principles that we've established I think 5 years ago. And as a result, like we are able to and we have ongoing conversations direction with our partners as a result of that. So YouTube performs pretty well on the brand safety side generally.
That's interesting.
So we feel pretty good there. And we do use tools and that you talk about complexity. Like we do buys through Zephyr and other ways to kind of add that layer of capability around insurances on brand safety, but it has had an impact of improving the results of the buy too.
Right. That's kind of interesting. 'Cause I think people might expect that, the wide openness of YouTube, it's going to be a brand safety issue, but it seems like they've implemented enough safeguards to work on that to make everybody comfortable. You make an interesting point.
I would just say they allow you to kind of blacklist certain types of content, right? So your brand doesn't show up near or around that. When we audit them against that, they perform really well.
Yeah. You make an interesting point though, the kids issue. I don't know how much of that. YouTube is young, which is a good thing for a lot of brands, but they have the YouTube Kids app, and they also have lots of regular kids using YouTube regular. I don't know. I don't know if you how can you tell how much of that 10% of CTV, let's say, is driven by underage kids? It's really hard to know.
That's a really good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that maps back to that 10% data point you have. Yeah. I do know though, when we buy YouTube across every platform, we have an age threshold, right? We have 21 is our threshold in the US. Right. And so it only goes to YouTube subscribers over the age of 21, right? As a check on ensuring on the audience. I don't know what that represents in terms of composition of their overall audience. Right. I still think it's a pretty big number. It may not get to the entire 10%, but I think it gets pretty far there.
Yeah. And that's something that some brands will like, some brands won't. Last thing for me, you hinted at this. You mentioned the different avenues you can use. I almost wonder, is YouTube, there's a lot of ways in between going through creators, programmatic, direct, platforms. Is it too complicated to buy YouTube? Is it just really depend on the tactic and the advertiser? What is that ecosystem like to navigate?
I would say it's too complicated if you don't have smart people working on it every day, right? So we have we actually just recently unveiled a YouTube playbook for the organization that includes all of the ways at which we want to go to market on the platform. It looks at three main components: are media, creative, and measurement. And we have very specific guidelines around True View or premium, and when you do that and how you do that. We look at some of the best practices from a creative standpoint in terms of especially with skippable advertising units and sixes, making sure that our brand is front and center at the beginning of the particular content whenever it shows up on screen. So there are things like that that we've done our due diligence with. In addition to that, we have a dedicated Google team there. It's the size of our brand kind of allows for us to have, maybe not all marketers have that kind of luxury. But with that, we regularly meet with them to make sure that we're optimizing based on whatever data we have readily available. Now, YouTube doesn't give us a ton of information and data, though we've tried to create workarounds to kind of ensure that what we do there, at the very least, we're able to measure some form of success metrics against it.
All right, but that's interesting that you've gone that far as having to develop a full-on playbook because of the complexity and the different tactics. Yeah,
sure.
Brad, great stuff. Thanks for your time here. Good conversation. We'll talk again.
Great. Thanks for having me.